Wonderful. So I'm going to get started because I think that's most people here. Okay, thanks so much everybody for making the time. I really appreciate it. Like I said, I know how busy everyone is, so the fact that you're able to make a bit of a gap in your diary to come hear from us is really appreciated. Um, for people who were here last week, you'd have been part of hearing from Harry and Tom already. If we've never had a chance to meet, then it's nice to meet you. I'm Ross. I'm one of the business partners in INDT, and on the team on mapping our services. Also, Harry, one of the service designers, and Tom, one of our emergency response officers, who has now joined our little project team, which is very exciting because that really means that we're getting that view from the front line directly into our project team. You know, Harry and I definitely don't know enough, and people like Tom are really helpful to, and essential rather, to making sure that what we do sort of validates thoughts and things. Um, so that was just a quick introduction. A few more people have joined, so it was just to say a quick hi to those who've just joined. Um, so the purpose of this afternoon's session is really just to take you through what we've been working on since last week. Obviously, we've done a bit more work. We've obviously got Tom in the team, like I said, which is great. Um, and yeah, I'm pretty much going to leave most of this to Tom to talk about because him and Harry have been doing all the hard work. So if I pass over to Tom now, but just before I do that, really important thing for us is this isn't just about us like sharing what we've done. We really want to hear from you and get your reflections. So you can share your reflections through the chat box, or we'll sort of ask questions at appropriate times. But we're really keen to sort of hear what you think about what we're talking about, because that helps us understand whether we're on the right track. Have we missed something? Do we need to think about something else? Those are super, super helpful. So Tom, over to you.
Thank you, and hello, colleagues from far and wide, some recognisable faces from last week and from my usual team. I guess I'll just start with the presentation. I know a big part of this project is about working in the open, and that essentially means that the live document that we will be sharing with you is something that's being edited daily. It's something that's being edited based on the insight that we get from show and tell sessions, from interviews, from the insight that I've been chirping into Harry's ear. It was nice of Ross to say I was essential. It's been a long time since someone's paid a compliment like that to me, but I really like the sentiment and the priority of linking the project to the frontline services, because it's important with a mapping service, which was something that was a bit abstract to me at first. It's important that it's reflective of the people that deliver the service, the people that request the service, and the service users that, what's the word, get the service when it happens to them. It's a terrible articulation, but I think you know where I'm going. So why map services? This might be a good time to share the document. So if you just bear with me, I'm just going to share into another screen.
I'll pop a link into the group chat as well so that everyone can open it themselves if they wish as well.
Let me just get it. All right, cool. Has everyone seen Mapping Services Crisis Response? Perfect. So I'll just start with, when I was seconded in at the start of the week, in my usual role as ERO, I'm used to thinking very operationally. And by that, I mean, I'm just used to literally thinking about the responsibilities I do and the volunteers I line manage and the vehicles I look after and deploy and what we deploy to. But being seconded to this project has forced me to start thinking a lot broader, and it's forced me to start trying to view CR and ER and the bigger offer that we make. And those that joined last week would have seen this document in a completely different form. This is the live document I was talking about that eventually is going to map the many services we offer, and it will hopefully reflect accurately what we're trying to map. The big change that we made last week was we recontextualized what was being displayed. And by that, I mean, those that are from ER and CR in here will be aware with the conceptual model of the 4 stages of emergency management. So you get mitigation, preparedness, response, and recovery. And we think, me and Harry decided that it would be a good way to phase the mapping like that, because as CR, we work across that landscape. So local authorities, emergency partners such as the fire service and local resilience forum use that 4 stages. So it's important that our mapping kind of reflects that. And eventually this document will display what we do, where we do it, and who's it for. And it will display more interesting things like the stats. So if we go in mitigation there, that might look a little bit odd, build relationship with Red Cross, but as ERCR colleagues know, we sit on a lot of local resilience forums. We're a partner on those groups, and those meetings fall under the mitigation part of what we're offering. And it's important that that's documented. Now that to me seemed a little bit strange at first because I thought it was a given. We attend meetings, we contribute to them, we learn about major incidents from them, and that's kind of that. But it's not really mapped or displayed anywhere other than inside our heads or inside local teams. So displaying that here just helps us see, right, that's a big part of CR and ER. The directorate sits on those groups and contributes to mitigation in those kind of ways. And if I go further down, got preparedness, preparing for a fire, preparing for a flood. This is all big parts of what we do. And there's a lot of steps to those services within that. So I found it quite difficult to understand why we were articulating that mappingly, because I thought we don't actually do that much to help people prepare for a fire. I certainly know we deploy volunteers to assist people that have had house fires with our work with the fire service, but what is it we actually do to help people prepare for that? And when I started taking that top-down approach and considered our emergency app, for example, which has educational material, it soon started to click that, okay, we do have material out there that contributes to that. Whether it's used a lot or if it's an effective use of our resource and information is a different question, but it's really important to get that mapped. And I think that's a quite helpful example of why mapping is really useful. And I know it might look a little bit strange for those that aren't working on the document, but I'm hoping people at least understand that once this mapping is complete, we'll be able to take a look and see this is where Red Cross begins their work in that 4 stages of emergency landscape and where they end. And it'll allow us to see where a lot of our resources are. So if we go to the top, we have big numbers in response and preparedness. Response is kind of obvious because that's the kind of work where we're deploying to assist people with house fires. It's rest centers at major incidents. We are heavily involved in that part of responding to a crisis. And I think that's a big part of ERCR directorate work. And eventually these will be beefed out. So tasks for service users are things they'd need to do in those situations. How is this service delivered now? That is going to be beefed out once we start having those interviews with SCROs and EROs across the region. And that list will grow. And the more insight we get and the more information we get, the more accurate that mapping is going to be. And we're also interviewing local councils and fire services as well. So I'm just hoping by the end of the project, it's going to be a really quality reflection of what CR and ER offer. And again, once we start filling in these stats, again, it's going to provide a really useful glance at what it is we're doing and where we spend a lot of our time and put a lot of our thought in. And hopefully that will inform future decisions about what we want to do, where we want to go, where we can help service users more. I'm seeing chat popping up, but I'm not actually able to read the messages. So if there are things I can answer,
yeah, I
let me know.
So I think Paul mentioned about that we used to carry out home fire safety checks. Is that something we still do in any areas?
To my knowledge, it's not. But something that I think colleagues will be aware is that you can have a conversation with someone from a different region and soon find out little bits and bobs that they might do down in Central, for example, that we won't do in the North. And again, that's a perfect example of why a mapping project is going to be really useful. Questions in there?
Yeah, Paul, is it something that you still do in South? Is it Northamptonshire that you're in?
Yeah. Obviously, during COVID-19,
I'm not getting that very well.
Sorry, Paul. Sorry, Paul. Your audio is a bit quite crackly. So it's quite hard to hear what you're saying.
I'll try.
Okay. So Paul and another Paul was saying about will the work capture scale and therefore inform resource requirements. What do you mean by scale, Paul?
Yeah, hi, Harry, it's Paul Etches. I'm just sort of thinking as you go around and you speak to forums and whether you start to collate some data from within it around what demand may be within certain areas to deliver those services, and therefore will that therefore inform what future resources are required. And I use that as a colleague of Tom's and the observations across the north, where currently everybody's sort of trying to juggle everything around. And I'm guessing there's two sides to that. One, I guess this will provide some focus ultimately, but the other one is I envisage it could also have an area of growth within it as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So Tom, can you scroll up to the prepare for a flood example? So this is what we were trying to capture in this. So we'll just scroll up to it. So this is what we're trying to capture in here with prepare for a flood, for example. So if you just scroll down to the stats bit at the bottom of the page, at the bottom of this example, yes, stats. So two things we're trying to capture here. One is like how many recent users. So for example, prepare for a flood, people are either looking at the emergencies app or our content on the Red Cross website. And then so that's the, I guess, current service users. And then the potential one might be everyone who's at risk of flooding in the UK, for example. So yeah, I think that's how we're thinking about capturing scale. And in terms of priorities, I guess we're probably thinking more like what digital tools might we need to build in the future, which is kind of the aim of this. But yeah, that's a really good question. And how we're starting to try and think about that, because we realised not all the services are proportionally the same in terms of what teams spend their time on.
Yeah, all right, thank you.
I think that question as well highlighted exactly why mapping is going to be a massive benefit for the service as well. Because depending on the context we're in, sometimes it feels like we do everything and involved with everything, and then others it's like, oh, what is it we actually do? And I don't think that's a bad question to ask ourselves, because sometimes it can be difficult to articulate, but knowing where one of the many services CR and ER offers sits on a mapping document will be really useful and helpful to inform future discussions. And like Harry was just saying, it would be really useful info to inform, is there room for some sort of product development there? Are there potential service user needs in that area where we don't actually have much involvement? And to me, at least my understanding is good mapping will help us see that, as opposed to keeping it in our heads, which I think a lot of the work we do can be within our individual heads, but also within collective team heads as well.
Going to your point, Emily, can you tell us more about looking at preparedness measures and basing it off like risk registers?
I haven't got too much to tell you at the moment, to be perfectly honest. It was an idea that was floated recently by some of my team, and they were saying that, similar to the point that Paul made, it's very difficult to know what resources we need and what we should be preparing for in terms of volunteer numbers, in terms of, you know, potential numbers of rest centres that might occur. And so actually what was suggested is that we draw on each of the local risk registers. Each county should have one, and actually then whether we work on like an area basis or in the smaller sort of groups of counties, that we actually identify the top risks that are identified and use those to shape the preparation that we do with the teams. So in terms of volunteer training, recruitment, thinking actually, right, for a coastal area, the likelihood is flooding, particularly East Coast where I am, is likely to occur. So let's focus on some of that for the volunteers, just to give us that bit more guidance and structure, which sometimes feels like it's lacking, to be honest, because as you say, we've got so many things to focus on.
You raise a really good point about like how things get planned at a sort of organizational, cross-organizational level. Like, Tom, can you scroll down to the like learn how to run a rest center one, which I think is fairly on the same bit. Oh yeah, like this kind of similar like stage came up when we were chatting with some volunteers, was talking about how there's quite a lot of showing councils and other organizations how to run a rest center, and it's this like, what do we need to do to get ready? And it definitely seems to be the thing you're chatting about. Like, I haven't got a word for it yet because it's still emerging, but like you're saying, like there seems to be some sort of how do we plan as informed as possible when emergencies happen, which I guess is maybe more like the mitigation phase or the preparation phase, do you think?
It overlaps, to my mind, to be perfectly honest, because obviously emergency response can be quite reactive. We never know exactly. We can prepare for as many sort of floods or whatever, and they might never eventually like materialize. That said, obviously, if there is a higher risk, we know that we're going to need to have volunteers that are equipped to deal with those situations that come up. So a certain amount of its mitigation. If, for example, in my counties, we are running rest centre training sessions for the local authorities. So we are training the rest centre managers for the additional considerations and sort of recapping some of their skills, because for some of them, they haven't looked at any of the plans for sort of years. And so we're running that, but we're also running the same thing with our teams, and the expectation, making sure that the expectation of the local authorities and that of the volunteers matches. So when it does occur, it removes some of those like barriers that we typically have. So I hope that makes sense. It was a little bit garbled.
No, not at all. It's really interesting, like getting a sense of that, because that's something clearly the Red Cross does a lot of in the background, so to speak. It's not immediately obvious from like looking at what like content and like software we have out there. So that's super interesting to find more about, and maybe we can try and focus some of our individual interviews with teams on some of that stuff.
Sorry.
No, go for it, Tom.
I was just going to say, I think that example was a good articulation of how using this landscape is really helpful for the mapping as well, because like you said, there are services we offer that very much link phases together, whether that's preparedness into response or mitigation into preparedness as well. And a lot of our services fall into those grey areas as well. So hopefully if they're articulated correctly in the document, it will be easier for us to see where that crossover is and inform future thinking. But yeah, like Ross was saying, it's an open document. I think it's been shared prior to this invite as well. Take a look in your own times as well, and any comments or suggestions would be massively helpful.
So we've got another question from Leah. So in reference to building relationships with local RCs, is that, what's an RC?
Red Cross.
Red Cross.
Red Cross, yeah. What about cross-border Red Cross, for example, the Irish Red Cross and the Red Cross in Northern Ireland? I guess I don't know enough about that, I guess, in terms of how it like crosses borders or areas. I'd be interested to, do you have an opinion on it or some experience?
Of course I have an opinion on it.
I was going to say, I know Leah well enough to know, I'm sure she'll have a view.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a big issue here. I mean, even with the likes of COVID and stuff, They have resources that we wouldn't necessarily have. We have resources that they necessarily wouldn't have. And in an ideal world, it would be absolutely fantastic if we could work a lot closer with them. It's very hard to do that because they have different policies and procedures, different restrictions. There's just so much to have to take into consideration with us working with the Irish Red Cross and their volunteers coming over to us and our volunteers going over to them, and working so closely together. I mean, I just think that for the future, it is definitely 110% something that really needs to happen, because there is no border. It doesn't exist. It's literally you go from one side of the street to the other and you're in Ireland, you're in Southern Ireland. So I just feel that it maybe needs built into this. And it needs more work done on it. We're already mapping where our volunteers are, where their volunteers are at the minute. We've mapped our border resources. So we kind of know where our resources are and where theirs are. But it's the finite detail that then goes into that for that relationship to happen. Very much highlighted during COVID. Not really sure what else you want me to add to that.
No, I think that's great and feedback. And one of the things, just to sort of point out, obviously Tom, I think, is contacting all of the areas to arrange to have a discussion with. We said 1 euro and 1 0 in every area, right? I'm looking at Tom. Yeah.
But it's 2 euros and 1 0, so Northern Ireland. So basically you'll get us all.
Yeah, well, that's good, and that'll be something that we can really bring out in that conversation, I think, just to make sure that we've captured your views on that, and then think how we put that into here.
Yeah, and then we would have a lot more sort of there'd be a lot more groups and stuff that we would sit on, and they'd look very different to England. And we work extremely closely with the fire service. We're literally, Northern Ireland are physically built into the Northern Ireland fire service infrastructure, like physically built into their computer system, so that if they need backup from Red Cross, they literally hit a button on their screen and automatically we're deployed. It's not even a phone call happens. Like, it's that quick and easy for them. So there's lots of different things to.
We'll have to have a further conversation so we can
indeed,
that insight a bit more. I like the eagerness, and we can capture that properly and reflectively as well. I'm just conscious that Martin put his hand up.
Formberg.
Yeah, good afternoon. Thanks. What you're describing, and forgive me if you're going to go on to this, are very much practical, procedural, task-driven aspects of ER. I just want to give a shout out to the softer side, which is the peer support program that's running in various guises around the nation. So that, caring for the carer is a significant part of what we're offering as well in ER. And some of that extends to our Cat 1s and 2 partners.
We're going to be talking to someone from the psychosocial mental health team. Is that correct?
Yeah.
I love that team, but yeah, we'll be talking to them and getting that insight out there as well. So
excellent.
Make sure to get the peer support work in, because in the north we've had some great peer support work done as well. I know for my area's contact is Lisa Hutchinson, and she's been working with Humberside Fire and South Yorkshire Fire, providing peer support to their teams as well, which is a great example of how we can link in with partners and what we can offer.
Yeah, and I believe it's due to expand as well into the health and care sector. So yeah, fantastic. Thank you.
That's all right.
Really great point. Thank you. So we're in our final 2 minutes which seems like we've whizzed through this, which is great. Still keen to, if there's any other reflections or comments coming, like please do keep coming in the chat, because we'll take the chat away and think about that as a project team as well. We do have these on a weekly basis, so if you feel like you didn't quite get enough out of today's session, you can come back next Thursday at 3:30 and get it all over again, where we'll give you another installment of what we've been thinking about, what we've been working on. But I can't emphasize this enough. The reason we're working on the open is not, it's not just because it's a buzzword. It's not like the latest trend. It's because the three of us passionately believe that in order for us to produce something meaningful, and when we go to Matthew Killick and say, these are our findings, we want it to be authentic and we want it to be real and something in which you all understand and feel some sort of alignment with. So yeah, your feedback, it is essential. It's so important that we get that. So please keep coming with any thoughts, comments, and if you want to just set up some time with one of us, if we've not contacted you proactively and you're thinking, I'd really love to get some of these guys time just to chat something through, by all means stick something in with us, because we'd be more than welcome. Okay. We're now just about to finish. If there's no other closing comment, there's not been anything coming up again on the chat. So yeah, if there's nothing else, then we'll just thank you all so much for your time again. Really appreciate it. And hopefully see you next week.
Cheers, guys.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.